My name is Catherine Brooks. I am 53 years old. This morning, I'm sitting at my kitchen table with a cut on my lip and a big purple bruise on my face. Yesterday, my husband hit me. He used the back of his hand and struck my cheek so hard I tasted blood in my mouth. I didn't yell. I didn't cry out loud. I just stood there while my face hurt and burned. But this morning was different. This morning, when my husband Richard came down the stairs thinking I would be scared and quiet like always, his smile disappeared. He saw who was sitting at my table with me, and his whole face changed to fear. That look on his face almost made up for all the times I cried alone in the dark. Before I tell you the whole story, I need you to do something. Please click the like button. Leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I need to know I'm not the only one who understands what it feels like to love someone so much that you forget who you are. Click subscribe so you don't miss stories like mine. Stories about women who had to break into pieces before they could become strong again. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a pretty city with old neighborhoods. There are beautiful houses with big front porches. Tall trees line the streets. Everything looks perfect from the outside. That's the problem. Pretty places can hide ugly secrets. Bad things happen behind closed doors, and nobody sees. I work as a librarian at a middle school. I've had this job for 20 years. Every day, I help kids find books. I read stories about brave heroes who fight bad guys and win. Stories where good always beats evil. I never thought I would be living in one of those stories. Never thought I'd be the woman with a hurt face trying to figure out how to escape from her own husband. Richard and I have been married for 17 years. 17 years. We don't have kids. It's just the two of us. We used to tell people we were perfect together. We were best friends. I learned something important. When someone becomes your whole world, they can also destroy your whole world. But let me tell you about this morning first. Then I'll go back and explain how everything went so wrong. How a good man turned into a monster. How a strong woman turned into someone who was afraid all the time. The special breakfast. This morning, my dining room table looked like something from a fancy magazine. I'm not making that up. I used our wedding dishes. We got them as a gift when we married, but we never used them because they were too nice. They're white with thin gold lines around the edges, the kind of plates you're scared to drop. I put out my best white tablecloth. It was made by my grandmother. She spent months sewing little flowers into the edges. Every stitch was made with love. I put fresh flowers in the middle of the table. White roses from my garden. The same kind of flowers I carried when I got married. I knew it meant something, using those flowers today. I cooked a huge breakfast, the kind my grandmother used to make. Creamy grits with melted cheese. Scrambled eggs, fluffy and soft. Thick bacon, cooked until crispy. Homemade biscuits from scratch, tall and golden, with butter melting on top. Fresh fruit on a pretty plate. Strawberries and melon, cut into perfect pieces. Coffee brewing in my good coffee maker. The one I bought for myself because Richard said it cost too much money. The smell filled our whole house. Butter, coffee, and something else you couldn't smell but was there anyway. Courage. The smell of finally being done with fear. I sat down at the head of the table. I sat up very straight. My hands were folded in my lap, very still. I wore my dark gray dress, the one I wore to my aunt's funeral. I wore my grandmother's pearl earrings. My hair was pulled back tight. Before I sat down, I looked at myself in the mirror by the door. I almost didn't recognize myself. My bruise was dark purple now. It spread from my cheek all the way down to my jaw. My bottom lip was swollen and split right in the middle where his hand had pushed it against my tooth. I looked like someone who had been in a fight. And I guess I had been. For 3 years. I heard Richard upstairs. The shower was running. His alarm was beeping. That same annoying sound he's used for years. I sat there and waited. My heart was beating so fast and hard I could hear it in my ears. But my hands didn't shake. After months and months of shaking hands, after years of being afraid, my hands were finally calm and still. At 8:15 the morning, I heard his footsteps coming down the stairs. Heavy steps, confident steps, the way someone walks when they think they've won. He walked into the dining room wearing his weekend clothes, a golf shirt, nice pants. His hair was still wet and combed neat. He looked at the table. I watched his face change. First, he looked confused, his eyebrows pushed together. He looked at all the food, then at me, then back at the food. Then he looked at my face, at the bruise he put there, at my hurt lip. Want to know what he did? He smiled. Not a sorry smile, not a guilty smile, a happy smile, a smile that said, "Good, I finally taught her a lesson." He sat down in his chair like a king sitting on his throne. He picked up one of my homemade biscuits. He looked at it like it was a prize he had won. He took a big bite. I watched him chew, watched crumbs fall from his mouth onto my grandmother's special tablecloth. Then he said something that proved what I already knew. He had changed into someone terrible. "You finally learned, didn't you?" His voice sounded happy, cheerful even, a little punishment. "And look now, you remember how to act, how to be a good wife." He laughed, actually laughed out loud. "This is how things should have been from the start, Kathy. You just needed to learn who's the boss." I didn't say anything. I just sat there watching him eat my biscuit, watching him lean back in his chair, looking so pleased with himself. He had no idea at all that everything was about to change. No idea that the woman sitting across from him wasn't the same scared woman he hit yesterday. Then, at exactly 8:22, the doorbell rang. Ding dong. That simple sound cut through the quiet morning like a knife cutting paper. I watched his face. The smile went away. His jaw got tight. "Who is that?" He put the biscuit down. He looked annoyed. "I told you I don't want visitors on weekends. Catherine, who did you invite here without asking me?" I stood up. Slowly, carefully. I smoothed my dress with my hands. Then I looked right into his eyes. "I invited them," I said. My voice was calm, cold. "And you're going to sit there and wait." I walked to the front door. Every single step felt like I was walking toward freedom. I could feel him watching me. I could sense him getting nervous, maybe even scared. Good. It was time he felt what I had been feeling for 3 whole years. I opened the door. There stood Officer Paula Jenkins in her police uniform. Her badge was shining in the morning sun. Next to her was Pastor James in his church clothes, black shirt with a white collar. His face looked serious and sad. And there was my sister Michelle, already crying, holding her purse tight like it was the only thing keeping her standing. They all looked at my face, at the bruise, at my cut lip. I saw anger flash in their eyes, all 3 of them, at the same time. But nobody said a word. They just followed me back into the dining room. When Richard saw them walk in, I swear all the color left his face. He went from his normal brown skin to gray in 1 second. The biscuit fell out of his hand. It hit the plate with a little sound clink, then rolled across the table, breaking into crumbs. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He stared at me. For the first time in 3 years, I saw real fear in his eyes. Real, true fear. "Catherine," he finally said. His voice sounded choked. Strangled. "What? What is this? What's going on?" I didn't sit back down. I stayed standing, facing him from across the table. Pastor James and Michelle stood on my right side. Officer Jenkins stood on my left side. Her hand was resting on her belt, right near her handcuffs. Everyone in that room understood what that meant. "This," I said, and my voice didn't shake at all, "is you finally having to face what you did, Richard. For 3 years you got away with it. Not anymore. This is the day you pay for what you've done." But I'm getting ahead of myself. To really understand this morning, to understand why I did all this, you need to hear the whole story from the beginning. You need to know who Richard used to be. You need to know how he changed. You need to know that I didn't always have bruises. I didn't always jump when he raised his voice. There was a time when Richard's voice made me happy, when just hearing him talk made me smile. If you've ever loved someone who ended up hurting you, keep watching. This story is for you too. In my kitchen, there's a digital picture frame sitting next to the coffee maker. My niece gave it to me 3 Christmases ago. The frame shows different pictures, one after another. It cycles through them automatically, a slideshow of my past. This morning, while I was cooking that big breakfast, while I was getting ready for the most important day of my life, those pictures kept changing on the screen. Every single picture felt like a knife going into my heart. The first picture was from our wedding day. We looked so young. I was 36 years old. Richard was 38. I wore a simple cream-colored dress. I was holding white roses. Richard wore a dark suit, and the smile on his face was real, genuine happiness. We were standing outside Grace Community Church, the church where we met, the church where we both volunteered to help feed homeless people. The sun was shining. Behind us, you could see all our family and friends. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was so happy for us. I remember that day perfectly. I remember thinking I was the luckiest woman alive. The next picture was from about 8 years ago. Richard was getting an award, Teacher of the Year for Mecklenburg County. Richard taught high school history. He was amazing at it. His students loved him. He made history exciting. He made kids care about people who lived hundreds of years ago. In the picture, he's holding a trophy. He's wearing his favorite tie, the one with little books all over it. I'm standing next to him with my arm around him. I'm looking up at him like he's the most wonderful person in the world, because back then, to me, he was. He was everything I admired. Smart, kind, caring. He used to quote famous people to his students. He'd come home and tell me stories about kids who were struggling and how he was helping them. He cared so much. He really, truly cared. Another picture popped up on the screen. This one was from a charity event 7 years ago. We were both helping to plan it. Richard was on the school board. I was running a program to teach reading to kids whose families didn't have much money. In the picture, we're all dressed up fancy. Me in a long black dress, him in a tuxedo. We're dancing together. His hand is on my back. We're both laughing at something. I can't remember what we were laughing about anymore, but I remember the feeling. I remember feeling safe, protected, loved. That's the word that matters most. Loved. We had a good life. A really, really good life. We owned this nice house in a historic neighborhood. We bought it together 14 years ago. It needed fixing, but we worked on it together, room by room. Richard sanded and stained all the wooden floors himself. I painted every wall, picked out every curtain. We had date nights every Friday. We'd go to this seafood restaurant by the water. He used to leave me little love notes, tiny pieces of paper hidden in my lunch bag. Have a beautiful day, my love. That's what he used to call me. His love. I'm telling you all this because it's important. I need you to understand something. I didn't marry a monster. I didn't marry a mean, terrible person. I married a good man who became a monster. And watching that happen, watching him change day by day, that hurt worse than any bruise, worse than any cut lip. Watching someone you love disappear and turn into someone who scares you. That's a special kind of pain. The change started 3 years ago. 3 years. That's when everything fell apart. That's when the man I married started dying and someone else started showing up in his place. It started with an accusation, a lie that destroyed everything. A girl at his school, a 17-year-old senior, told people that Richard touched her in a wrong way. She said it happened when he was helping her study after school. That accusation exploded our lives like a bomb. One day, everything was normal. The next day, Richard was suspended from his job while people investigated. I knew it wasn't true. I knew it with every part of my heart. Richard would never, ever do something like that. He was a good teacher, a good man. They investigated him, the school, the police. Everyone looked into it. For 2 whole months, we lived in hell. 2 months of people whispering. 2 months of neighbors staring. 2 months of wondering if our whole lives were about to be destroyed. Then finally, they proved it was a lie, completely made up. They found text messages on the girl's phone. Messages to her friends about how she was angry at Richard for giving her a bad grade. Messages about how she was going to make him pay. Messages about her whole plan. The girl got expelled. The case was closed. Richard got his job back, but the damage was already done. You know how it works. Once someone says something bad about you, people remember it. It doesn't matter if it's proven false later. People remember the accusation. They forget the truth. Parents started taking their kids out of Richard's classes. Teachers who used to eat lunch with him suddenly had other things to do. The school board asked him to step down. For the good of the district, they said, to let things calm down. He was moved to a different school across town, away from the school where he'd taught for 14 years, where he knew everyone, where everyone respected him, to a new school where he was just that teacher with the accusation. It didn't matter that he was innocent. The stain was there. It wouldn't wash away. His reputation, the thing he'd built his whole adult life on, was destroyed. I watched him break under the weight of it. At first, I thought he'd recover. Richard was strong. He was tough. He'd bounce back. But then the drinking started. It began about a month after he went back to work. Just 1 glass of whiskey at night to help him sleep, he said. Then it was 2 glasses. Then 3. Then half the bottle. He'd come home from school and walk straight to the cabinet where we kept alcohol. Wouldn't even change his clothes first. Just pour a glass, drink it, pour another. Then the anger started. Not right away. At first, he was just sad, defeated. He'd sit on the couch with his drink and stare at nothing for hours. But sadness turned sour. It turned into something ugly and mean. And that ugliness needed a target. That target became me. It started so small, I almost didn't notice it happening. Little comments, little criticisms. If you had spoken up more during the investigation, maybe people would believe me now. You're so quiet at church. People probably think you have doubts about me too. You could have defended me better. Everything became my fault. Not the girl who lied. Not the school board who abandoned him. My fault. Because I didn't do enough. Because I wasn't enough. Then he started controlling things. Small things at first. He took over our money. Said I was spending too much. That we needed to be more careful. He took my debit card. Started giving me an allowance. $40 a week for groceries and anything else I needed. When I said that wasn't fair, he said I was being selfish. Said he was the one working full-time now. That his salary was bigger than mine. That he should be the one in charge of money. And God forgive me, I let him. Because I thought it was just stress. I thought once he adjusted to the new school, once some time passed, he'd go back to being the man I married. He started isolating me from my friends. Every time I wanted to go out, he'd make comments. Going to talk about me with your friends? Going to tell them you think I'm guilty too? It was easier to just stay home. Easier to avoid the fight. So, I stopped going to book club. Stopped having coffee with Sarah from church. Stopped calling my sister as much. I made my world smaller and smaller. Because it was the only way to have any peace. About 2 years ago, the first really bad thing happened. The thing I'll never forget. It was a Tuesday night. I'd made dinner. Meatloaf with mashed potatoes. His favorite meal. He came home late, already half drunk, sat down at the table without saying hello. I tried to make conversation. Asked how his day went. He just grunted. I asked if the food was okay. He looked at me with these cold, empty eyes and said, "It's dry. The meat is dry. Can't you do anything right anymore?" I said I was sorry, that I could make something else if he wanted. That's when he picked up his plate and threw it, not at me, at the wall. The plate shattered. Meatloaf and potatoes slid down the wall onto the floor, gravy everywhere. He looked at the mess, then looked at me. "Clean it up," he said. Then he walked upstairs. I stood there frozen. I don't know for how long. Then I got paper towels. I cleaned the wall. I picked up every broken piece of plate. I scrubbed until the stain was gone. And I told myself it was the alcohol. It was the stress. It wasn't really him. But it kept happening, over and over, not every day, not even every week, but enough that I started living on eggshells. I learned to tell his mood from the sound of his car door when he got home. A soft close meant he was okay. A slam meant I needed to stay out of his way. I learned what topics to avoid. Don't mention the old school. Don't mention the accusation. Don't ask about his day if he looks tired. Don't breathe too loud. Don't ask too many questions. Don't exist too much. About a year and a half ago, he got physical for the first time. Not hitting, not yet, but close. We were arguing about money. I'd gotten my hair cut without asking first. Used $45 from my own paycheck. He saw the receipt and lost his mind. Started yelling about how I was selfish, how I didn't respect him, how I was just like everyone else who betrayed him. I tried to walk away, said I didn't want to fight. He grabbed my arm, grabbed it hard. His fingers dug into my skin. He pulled me back. "Don't you walk away when I'm talking to you," he said. His face was inches from mine. I could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You don't get to walk away." He held my arm for what felt like forever. When he finally let go, there were red marks, 5 of them, 1 for each finger. The next day, those marks turned into bruises, purple fingerprints on my arm. I wore long sleeves for a week. Told Sarah at the library I was cold. In Charlotte, in July. That night, I almost left. I packed a bag, had it sitting on the bed. Then Richard came into the bedroom. He saw the bag, and something like panic crossed his face. He dropped to his knees. Actually dropped to his knees right there in front of me. And he started crying, sobbing, saying he was sorry, that he didn't know what came over him, that it would never happen again. He put his arms around my waist, buried his face against me, cried like a baby, and I unpacked the bag. I held him while he cried. I told him it was okay, that we'd get through this together, that I forgave him, because that's what wives do, right? That's what love means, right? Standing by your partner when things get hard. That's what I'd always been taught. That's what I believed. But it did happen again. Of course it did, because I'd shown him there were no real consequences. He could hurt me and I'd stay. He could scare me and I'd forgive him. So the boundaries kept moving. The line kept shifting. He grabbed me again. Harder the next time. Shoved me once, not hard, but enough that I stumbled. And every time, there were tears, apologies, promises. And every time, I believed him. Because I wanted to believe him. Because I needed to believe that somewhere inside this angry, bitter man was the man I married. The words got meaner, crueler. "School librarian," he'd sneer. "What an important job. Reading picture books to kids." At least I used to do something that mattered. He'd compare me to other women, women who stood by their husbands better, women who knew when to be quiet, women who were actually pretty. That last one hurt more than I want to admit. I stopped looking in mirrors, started wearing bigger, looser clothes. I felt myself shrinking, getting smaller, in every way. About 13 months ago, I tried to leave again. I found an apartment listing, a small place on the other side of town. I went to look at it during lunch break. It was tiny, just 1 bedroom. But it had windows that let in lots of light. It was quiet. I could picture myself there, sitting in the morning sun with tea, not worried about what mood my husband would be in, not jumping at every sound. I filled out an application to rent it. That night, Richard found the application in my purse. I don't know what he was looking for in there, but he found it. He was standing in the bedroom doorway when I came out of the shower, holding that paper. His face was red. His jaw was clenched tight. "What is this?" I pulled my robe tighter around me. "Richard, I can't keep doing this. I think we need time apart." "Time apart?" He said it like the words tasted bad. "You want to leave your husband? After everything I've been through? After everything I've lost? Now you want to abandon me too?" "I'm not abandoning you," I said. I could hear my voice shaking. I just think if we have some space, maybe we can both figure things out. You're not leaving." He stepped into the room. I stepped back until my back hit the wall. "You're not going anywhere, Catherine. You're my wife. You made a promise. For better or worse. And just because things got worse, you think you can run? Richard, please. Where are you going to go?" He was moving closer. I was trapped against the wall. "Who's going to believe your story? What are you going to tell people? That your husband raised his voice sometimes? That he got upset? Poor you." He was right in my face now. "You're not leaving. You belong here. With me. Do you understand?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded. He turned and walked out, taking the application with him. I heard him rip it up in the kitchen. Heard the pieces hit the garbage. I sat on the edge of the bed. And I realized something terrible. I realized I was trapped. That I'd waited too long. That the man who used to leave me love notes now thought of me as something he owned. The months after that were the darkest time of my life. I went to work, came home, made dinner, tried to be invisible. I stopped smiling, stopped laughing. I felt like a ghost living in my own house. My sister Michelle, who I used to talk to every week, started asking questions. "Kat, are you okay? You sound different. Is everything all right with Richard?" I lied, told her everything was fine, just tired from work, just getting older. She didn't push it, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. Sarah, my friend from work, she tried to reach out too. She's a police officer, has good instincts. She saw me at the grocery store about 8 months ago. I was wearing a turtleneck in September. She really looked at me, studied my face, asked if I was okay. I lied to her too. Said I was fighting off a cold, didn't want to get a chill. She gave me her business card, told me to call if I ever needed anything at all. I put the card in my wallet, tried to forget about it, but I couldn't forget, because things kept getting worse. Richard stopped even pretending to be sorry when he'd grab me or shove me or corner me. There were no more tears, no more apologies, just cold silence, like it was normal now. Like this was just what our marriage was. I started to believe it, started to think maybe this was what I deserved, that maybe I'd failed him so badly that his anger was justified. 4 months ago, he started coming home later and later, smelling not just of whiskey but of cigarettes too, even though he'd quit smoking 12 years ago. He'd stumble in at midnight, 1 in the morning. I'd be in bed pretending to sleep, listening to him crash into furniture downstairs. He'd come upstairs, get into bed without showering, pass out. The whole room would smell like alcohol and smoke and something else. Rage. If rage had a smell, that was it. 2 months ago, I stopped sleeping in our bed, told him my back hurt, that the guest room mattress was firmer, better for my spine. He didn't even argue. I don't think he cared. I think he was relieved not to have to look at me. And honestly, I was relieved too. Relieved not to lie next to him, wondering if tonight would be the night things went too far. Then came yesterday, the day everything finally broke open. The day I finally saw the truth with perfect clarity. His hand came up fast. For 1 second, I thought he would grab me again like he always did, but his hand kept moving. It swung across and hit my face. The back of his hand smacked my cheek so hard it made a loud cracking sound in our quiet kitchen. The force of it made my head turn to the side. My lip caught on my tooth and split open. I tasted blood right away. It was warm and metallic in my mouth. The pain was sharp and immediate. It spread across my face like fire burning me. But something hurt worse than the physical pain. The realization that he'd actually done it. After 3 years of pushing, grabbing, shoving, backing me into corners, he'd finally hit me in the face. Like I was nothing. Like I was less than nothing. I stood there with my hand coming up to my mouth. I felt blood on my fingers. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And I didn't recognize the man standing in front of me. This wasn't Richard. This wasn't my husband. This was a stranger who looked like him but had none of his soul left inside. He was breathing hard, staring at his own hand like he couldn't believe what it had done. But he didn't apologize. He didn't cry or fall to his knees like those other times. He just looked at me. His face was cold, empty. "Clean yourself up," he said. "You're bleeding on the floor." Then he turned and walked out. Walked out like he'd just commented on the weather, like he hadn't just shattered everything we'd ever been. I heard him go upstairs. Heard the bedroom door close. I stood there in the kitchen with blood dripping from my lip onto my burgundy robe, the beautiful robe my sister gave me, and I felt something inside me break. But it wasn't my spirit. It was the chains I'd been wearing for 3 years, the chains of hoping he'd change, the chains of fear that I couldn't survive without him, the chains of believing that love meant enduring everything. Those chains broke, and what was left was clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. I walked to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me had a swollen lip, blood on her chin, a bruise already forming on her cheek, but her eyes were different. They were awake. I washed my face with cold water. The water stung my split lip, but I welcomed the pain. It was proof that I was still alive. Still here. I pressed a cold cloth to my mouth until the bleeding stopped. Then I went back to the kitchen, and I made a decision. The decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to call the police right then. I wasn't going to pack a bag and run to my sister's house, because I knew Richard. He'd twist it. He'd say it was an accident. He'd cry and apologize and promise to change. If I left right then, in the middle of the night, without proof, without witnesses, it would just be my word against his. And his word still carried weight in this community. He was the teacher who'd been falsely accused. He was the victim of a lying teenager. People felt sorry for him. They'd say I was exaggerating, that I was being dramatic, that marriages have rough patches. No. I needed to do this differently. I needed to do it in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away. I needed witnesses. I needed proof. I needed to make sure that when he tried to claim I was overreacting, there would be people who'd seen my face, who'd heard the truth from my own mouth, who couldn't be swayed by his tears or his charm. So I started planning. Right there at midnight, with a split lip and a bruising cheek, standing in my kitchen, I planned his downfall. And mine too, in a way. Because I knew that doing this would mean the end of my marriage, the end of the life I'd built, the end of the woman I'd been for 17 years. But that woman was already dead. She died when his hand connected with her face. What I was doing now was building something new from the ashes. The first thing I did was take out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I made myself dial. I called my sister Michelle first. She lives in Raleigh, 2 hours away. The phone rang 4 times before she answered. Her voice was thick with sleep. "Kat, what's wrong? It's midnight." And I told her. God, I told her everything. About the drinking, the anger, the control, the fear. About the grabbing and shoving. And tonight, about the slap. My voice was remarkably steady as I talked, like I was telling her about someone else's life. She didn't interrupt. Just listened with these little gasps and sobs. When I finished, there was silence. Then she said, "I'm coming. I'm getting in my car right now." "No," I said. "Not now. Come in the morning. I need you here at 8 a.m. Can you do that?" "Kat, what are you planning?" "Justice," I said. "I'm planning justice. Will you be here?" "I'll be there," she said. "I'll leave at 5. I'll be there." The second call was harder. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Pastor James's number. He'd married us. He'd counseled us through problems before things got really bad. He was a good man, a kind man, a man who believed marriage was important, but also believed human life was important. I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. "Sister Catherine, is everything all right?" "No, Pastor," I said. "Everything is not all right. I need to tell you something and I need you to just listen. Can you do that?" "Of course, sister." And I told him too. Not everything. Not all 3 years, but enough. About Richard's anger. About his drinking. About tonight. About the bruise on my face and the split lip. About the realization that if I didn't do something, there might come a night when I didn't walk away. When I finished, Pastor James was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you need from me, Sister Catherine? I need you to come to my house tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. I need you to be a witness. I need you to see what he's done. And I need you to stand with me when I do what I have to do." "I'll be there," he said without hesitation. "I'll be there, and I'll bring the weight of our faith community with me. You're not alone, sister. You've never been alone." The third call was to Paula, Officer Paula Jenkins, my friend from work who I'd been avoiding for months. I pulled her card out of my wallet, where I'd kept it all this time. I dialed the number. It rang and rang. I thought she might not answer. But then she did. "Jenkins." "Paula, it's Catherine. Catherine Brooks." There was a pause. "Catherine, it's late. What's wrong?" "Everything," I said. And I told her too. Everything. Paula, being a cop, being trained for this, went into professional mode immediately. "Where is he now?" "Asleep upstairs." "Are you safe right now? Do I need to send a car?" "I'm safe for now. But I need you to come tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. I'm going to confront him with witnesses. Then I'm going to file charges. But I need you there. Catherine, I should come now. I should arrest him now." "No," I said firmly. "This is my house. My life. I need to do this my way. Please, Paula. Trust me." She sighed. 8 a.m. I'll be there. But if anything happens before then, you call 911 immediately. Promise me." "I promise." After I hung up, I looked at the clock. It was almost 1. 0 inches, the morning. I had 7 hours until they'd arrive. 7 hours to prepare. 7 hours to transform this house from my prison into my courtroom. I started cooking. I know it sounds strange, but I needed something to do. Something to keep my hands busy and my mind focused. And there was something symbolic about it too. For 3 years, I'd cooked meals that he criticized or ignored, or tonight, that made him so angry he hit me. But this meal, this breakfast would be different. This would be the last meal I ever cooked for him. And it would be perfect. I took out my cast iron Dutch oven. It was a wedding gift. This beautiful pot we'd received from Richard's aunt. We'd barely used it because it was so nice. Too nice for everyday cooking. But nothing about today was going to be every day. I made cheese grits from scratch, the kind my grandmother used to make, with sharp cheddar stirred in at the end until it was creamy and rich. While the grits simmered, I made biscuits, real buttermilk biscuits, cut out with my grandmother's old biscuit cutter, the tin one that's been in my family for generations. I used my stand mixer, the red one I'd bought for myself last Christmas when Richard said it cost too much money. I'd used my own money. Money I'd hidden away in small amounts over months. I made the dough, rolled it out, cut the biscuits, put them in the oven. The smell of them baking filled the house. Butter and buttermilk and hope. While the biscuits baked, I made bacon. Thick-cut bacon, the expensive kind. I laid each strip carefully in my cast-iron skillet and listened to them sizzle. I scrambled eggs with cream, the way my mother taught me. I sliced fresh fruit, arranged it on a platter. I set the coffee maker to brew at 7:45. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be ready at around 3 a.m. I thought about the bruise on my face. I went to my bathroom and looked at my makeup drawer. I have this special concealer, heavy-duty coverage. I bought it online for $40. It promised to cover anything. I'd been using it to cover the fingerprint bruises on my arms when I wore short sleeves. I took it out, held it in my hand. I could cover the bruise on my face. I could hide what he'd done, make it easier for him, make it less shocking for the people coming. Then I threw it in the trash, the whole tube. $40 wasted. Because no more hiding, no more making it easier for him, no more protecting him from the consequences of his actions. They needed to see. Pastor James needed to see. Paula needed to see. My sister needed to see, and Richard most of all. Richard needed to see what he'd done in the cold light of day, with no alcohol to blur it, no anger to justify it. Just the plain, undeniable truth written on my face. Around 4 a.m., I did something else. Something I'd been planning for weeks but hadn't had the courage to do. I'd ordered a video doorbell online. It had arrived a week ago, still in the box in my closet. I got it out. Read the instructions. Installed it. It took me longer than it should have because I'm not great with technology, but I figured it out. I mounted it next to the front door, downloaded the app on my phone, connected it. From now on, everything that happened at my front door would be recorded. Every conversation, every confrontation. I couldn't change the past, but I could document the future. I also set up my tablet on the bookshelf in the dining room, angled so it would record the table, hidden behind some books but recording. I needed proof. I needed evidence, in case he tried to claim later that I was lying, that I was exaggerating. I'd have video. I'd have witnesses. I'd have everything I needed. By 5 a.m., the house was starting to wake up. The sky outside was turning from black to dark blue. I set the table with our wedding china, the plates we'd gotten as a gift and kept in the cabinet because they were too special. Well, this was special. This was the most important breakfast of my entire life. I spread out my grandmother's tablecloth, the white one with the hand-embroidered edges. Each stitch, a labor of love. I wondered what my grandmother would think of what I was doing. She'd been married for 48 years before my grandfather passed, but it had been a good marriage. A kind marriage. She would understand. I think she'd be proud. I arranged fresh flowers in the center of the table. White roses from my garden, the same flowers from my wedding bouquet. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. These flowers represented promises made and promises broken. Around 6 a.m., I went upstairs to get dressed. I walked past the bedroom where Richard was sleeping. I could hear him snoring, that heavy, congested snore of someone who drank too much. The sound used to be endearing, proof that he was deeply asleep and at peace. Now it just sounded ugly, like everything else about him. I went to my room, the guest room that had become my sanctuary. I showered in my bathroom, washing away the dried blood, the tears, the fear. I stood under the hot water, and I let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The grief of losing my marriage, the terror of what I was about to do, the relief that it would finally be over, the guilt that maybe I'd given up too soon. But then I touched my swollen lip, and I knew I hadn't given up too soon. I'd held on too long. I got out, dried off, got dressed. I chose my charcoal dress carefully, the one I wore to my father's funeral. It felt appropriate. This was a funeral of sorts. The death of Catherine, the wife. The death of the woman who'd stayed silent. I was burying her today. I put on my grandmother's silver earrings, pulled my hair back into a tight bun, looked at myself in the mirror one last time. The bruise was dark purple now, spreading across my cheek. My lip was swollen and split. I looked like a victim of domestic violence, because that's what I was. And it was time to stop pretending otherwise. By 7:30, I was sitting at the head of the dining room table. The food was ready, set out in serving dishes. The coffee was brewed, filling the house with its rich smell. Everything was in place. All I had to do was wait. At 7:50, I heard Richard's alarm go off upstairs, that annoying beep that had woken me up for 17 years. I heard him hit snooze. Then 5 minutes later, it went off again. This time, he shut it off. I heard the bed creak as he got up, heard him go to the bathroom, heard the shower start. He was taking his time. No idea what was waiting for him downstairs. At 8:15, he came down. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, heavy and confident. The footsteps of a man who thought he'd put me in my place. He walked into the dining room, and I watched his face go through a series of expressions: confusion, surprise, calculation, and then satisfaction. That smile that spread across his face like poison. That smile that said he thought he'd won. He sat down, took a biscuit, said those words. You finally learned, huh? A little discipline, and look, you remember how to be a wife. He laughed, actually laughed. This is how it should have been all along, Kathy. You just needed to understand who's in charge. And I waited. I sat there in my funeral dress with my split lip and my bruised face, and I waited for the doorbell to ring. And when it did at exactly 8:22, when that simple ding-dong cut through the morning air, I stood up. I smoothed my dress, and I said, I invited them. I walked to the door and opened it. There they were. Officer Paula Jenkins in her uniform, her badge shining in the morning sun. Pastor James in his clergy collar, his face sad and serious. My sister, Michelle, tears already streaming down her face. They looked at me, really looked at me. They saw the bruise. They saw the split lip. And I saw the rage flash in their eyes, the righteous anger of people who love you and who have just seen proof that you've been hurt. We walked into the dining room together, and I will never forget the look on Richard's face. The color drained away, the biscuit fell from his hand, and for the first time in 3 years, he was afraid. Not angry, not defensive, afraid. Catherine, he said. His voice was strangled. What is this? I didn't sit down. I stood at the head of the table, flanked by my sister, my pastor, and a police officer. I stood tall, even though my back hurt, even though my face throbbed, even though my heart was breaking. I stood tall because I had to. This, I said, and my voice was cold and clear, is the consequence you've been running from for 3 years, Richard. This is the reckoning. And then I told him everything. I told him in front of witnesses. I told him how he'd changed, how the drinking started and the anger grew, how he isolated me and controlled me and made me feel like I was nothing. I told him about the first time he grabbed me, and all the times after that. I told him about the fear I'd lived with, the eggshells I'd walked on, the pieces of myself I'd lost trying to keep him calm. And last night, I said, my voice steady even though tears were streaming down my face. Last night you crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. You hit me. You looked me in the face and you hit me. And then you walked away like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. Richard tried to speak. Catherine, please. Let me explain. No. I cut him off. No more explanations. No more excuses. No more blaming the alcohol or the accusation or me. You did this. You made these choices. And now you get to live with the consequences. Pastor James stepped forward. Brother Richard, he said, and his voice was heavy with disappointment. I've known you for 14 years. I married you and Sister Catherine. I've prayed with you, counseled you, and I'm telling you now, as your pastor and as a man of God, what you've done is unconscionable. It is unforgivable without true repentance. And right now, all I see is a man who's been caught, not a man who's sorry. Richard's face crumpled. Pastor, please. It's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like, Paula said, stepping forward. Her voice was professional, detached. Mr. Brooks, my name is Officer Paula Jenkins with Charlotte PD. Mrs. Brooks has made me aware of an assault that occurred last night at approximately midnight. An assault that left visible injuries. She gestured to my face. I'm here to inform you that she will be filing formal charges. You can't be serious, Richard said, looking at me. Catherine, you can't do this. I'm your husband. This is a private matter. It stopped being private when you hit me, I said. It stopped being private when your fist connected with my face. It stopped being private when I had to taste my own blood because of you. My sister Michelle spoke up. Her voice was shaking with emotion. How could you? How could you hurt her like this? She loved you. She stood by you through everything. And this is how you repay her? Michelle, you don't understand, Richard started. I understand perfectly. Michelle cut him off. I understand that my sister has been suffering in silence for 3 years. I understand that she's been covering bruises and making excuses and shrinking herself to make you comfortable. I understand that she almost let you destroy her completely, but that ends today." Richard looked around the table at all of us. I could see the realization dawning on his face. There was no way out. No smooth talk, no tears, no promises would fix this. The evidence was on my face. The witnesses were in the room. The law was standing in uniform by the door. "Catherine, please," he said, and his voice broke. "Please don't do this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking clearly. I'll get help. I'll stop drinking. I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't call the police. Please don't destroy my life." "I'm not destroying your life," I said quietly. "You destroyed it yourself. I'm just making sure you face the consequences. For once in 3 years, you're going to face real consequences." Paula pulled out her handcuffs. "Mr. Brooks, I need you to stand up and place your hands behind your back." "No," Richard said, panic flooding his face. "No, you can't arrest me. I'm a teacher. I have a job. People will find out." "You should have thought about that before you put your hands on your wife," Paula said. Her voice was still calm. "Stand up, Mr. Brooks." He looked at me one more time, and I saw it. The moment he realized I wasn't going to save him, that I wasn't going to back down or change my mind or make excuses for him. The woman who would have done that, who had done that for 3 years, she was gone. And the woman standing in her place, the woman with the split lip and the bruised face and the spine of steel, she was someone new. "Stand up," Paula said again. Richard stood. Slowly, shakily. He put his hands behind his back. Paula cuffed him. The click of the metal was the loudest sound in the room. She read him his rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." I watched it happen. Watched my husband of 17 years being arrested in our dining room, and I felt 1,000 things at once. Grief for what we'd been. Relief that it was over. Fear of what came next. Guilt that it had come to this. But most of all, I felt free. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe. As Paula led him toward the door, he turned to look at me. "You're going to regret this," he said. His voice was low, meant just for me. "You're going to be alone in this big house with nothing but your memories, and you're going to regret it." I met his eyes. "Maybe," I said, "maybe I will regret it, but I'll regret it alive. I'll regret it free, and that's more than I've had in 3 years." They took him away. I heard the front door open and close. Heard the car start and drive away, and then the house was silent. That heavy, complete silence that comes after something monumental has happened. I stood there in the dining room, and my legs gave out. I sat down hard in the chair, and that's when I finally let myself fall apart. I put my face in my hands and I sobbed. Huge, wrenching sobs that came from the deepest part of me. I cried for the marriage I'd lost, for the man I'd loved who'd become someone I feared, for the 3 years I'd spent being afraid, for the woman I'd been who'd let it happen. I cried for everything. Michelle and Pastor James stayed with me. Michelle held me while I cried, and Pastor James prayed. He prayed for my healing, for my strength, for my future. He prayed for Richard too, for his soul, for his redemption, and I let him. Because even after everything, even after the bruise on my face and the split lip and the fear, I didn't hate Richard. I just couldn't love him anymore. Not the way he'd become. If this story is helping you understand your own situation, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. You're not alone. The days after were strange. The house felt enormous and empty. Every sound echoed. Every room held memories that now felt tainted. Michelle stayed with me for a week. She helped me start the process of filing for divorce. She helped me change the locks on the doors. She helped me pack up Richard's things and put them in the garage for him to collect later. The arrest made the news. Local teacher arrested on domestic violence charges. I stayed off social media. But Michelle told me people were talking. Some were supportive, Some were shocked. Some, predictably, said I was overreacting, that every marriage has problems, that I should have tried harder to work it out. Those people I learned to ignore, because they didn't see what I saw. They didn't live what I lived. Richard was charged with simple assault, because it was a first offense. At least officially. He got bail quickly, but there was a restraining order. He couldn't come within 500 feet of me, couldn't contact me except through lawyers. The school board put him on administrative leave, pending the outcome of the case. His reputation, which he'd been so desperate to protect, was in tatters again. But this time, he'd done it to himself. I started therapy. Dr. Maria Santos, a trauma counselor who specializes in domestic violence. At first, I couldn't talk. I'd sit in her office and just cry. But slowly, over weeks and months, I started to find words. Started to unpack 3 years of fear and shame and misplaced guilt. She helped me see that I wasn't responsible for Richard's choices, that I couldn't have loved him enough to change him, that leaving wasn't failure, it was survival. I also started going to a support group, women who'd been through what I'd been through, and in that room, hearing their stories, I realized I wasn't alone. There were others who understood the particular hell of loving someone who hurts you, who understood the guilt and the fear and the desperate hope that maybe this time would be different. We held each other up, those women and me. We shared our stories and our strength, and slowly, I started to heal. About 3 months after the arrest, I got a letter from Richard. He was in court-mandated rehab and anger management. The letter was short. He said he was sober, that he was facing what he'd done, that he was sorry, truly sorry. He said he didn't expect forgiveness, but he wanted me to know that I was right, that I'd saved his life by stopping him, that if I hadn't done what I did, he might have kept going until one of us was dead. I read that letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer, because even though part of me was glad he was getting help, even though part of me still cared what happened to him, I couldn't let him back into my life. Not ever. That door was closed, locked. The woman who might have opened it was gone. The divorce was finalized 6 months after the arrest. I got the house. He didn't fight me on it. I think by then he understood the magnitude of what he'd done, or maybe he was just too tired to fight. Either way, the house became mine, truly mine, and I started making it mine again. I painted the walls colors I liked. I rearranged the furniture. I threw out everything that reminded me of him. I kept only what brought me peace. I also made changes to make myself feel safe. I kept the video doorbell. I added more cameras, one in the backyard, one in the living room. I got a new security system with sensors on all the doors and windows. I got a better lock for the front door, one of those smart locks you can control from your phone. Some people might think it's paranoia, but to me, it's taking back control. It's saying that this is my space now, and I decide who gets to enter it. About a year after everything happened, I was finally ready to live again. Not just survive, but actually live. I got promoted at work, head librarian, a position I'd been passed over for twice before because I'd been too distracted, too consumed by what was happening at home. I threw myself into the job. I started new programs for kids. I built partnerships with local schools. I remembered why I'd fallen in love with this work in the first place. I also bought something for myself. A small beach cottage on the outskirts of town. It's tiny. Just a bedroom and a living room and a little kitchen. But it has a porch that faces the ocean. I go there on weekends. I sit on that porch with a cup of coffee and a book, and I listen to the waves, and I feel at peace. Real peace. The kind I didn't think I'd ever feel again. I've started dating again. Casually. Carefully. I'm not ready for anything serious, and I might never be. But it's nice to remember that there are kind men in the world. Men who listen when you talk. Men who respect boundaries. Men who understand that trust is earned, not demanded. About 18 months after the divorce, Richard asked to meet with me, through his therapist, officially, supervised. He wanted to apologize in person, part of his recovery program. I thought about it for a long time. Asked Dr. Santos what she thought. She said it was up to me, that I didn't owe him anything, but that sometimes closure can be healing. So I agreed. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. His therapist sat at a nearby table, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to give us privacy. Richard looked different, thinner, older, sober. His eyes were clear in a way they hadn't been in years. He didn't make excuses. He said he was sorry. He said he'd been working on understanding why he'd become who he'd become, that losing his job and his reputation had broken something in him, but that he'd taken his brokenness out on me instead of dealing with it. He said he was on medication now, going to AA meetings 3 times a week, seeing a therapist twice a week, that he'd lost everything, his marriage, his career, his home, and that he deserved to lose it all. I listened, and when he was done, I said, "Thank you. Thank you for apologizing. Thank you for getting help." But I also told him that we would never be us again, that the man he used to be and the woman I used to be, those people, were gone, that what we had was destroyed and there was no rebuilding it. He nodded, said he understood, said he hoped someday I could forgive him, but that he understood if I never did. And then he left, and I sat there with my coffee, and I realized I did forgive him, in a way. Not the kind of forgiveness that means forgetting, not the kind that means reconciliation, but the kind that means I was releasing the hold that anger and pain had on me. I was letting it go so I could move forward without carrying it. Today, I'm 54 years old. My face healed. The bruise faded to yellow, then disappeared. My lip healed, though there's a tiny scar if you look closely. A reminder, not of what he did to me, but of what I did for myself. Of the day I chose to save my own life. I'm not the woman I was before I met Richard. I'm not even the woman I was during those 3 years of fear. I'm someone new, someone stronger, someone who knows her worth, someone who knows that love without respect is just imprisonment with a prettier name, someone who knows that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. That breakfast wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. Justice for every woman who's been told he didn't mean it. Justice for every person who thinks love means enduring violence. Justice for everyone who's ever felt trapped in their own home by someone who claimed to love them. I served Richard a breakfast he never expected. Witnesses, accountability, consequences. And I served myself something I'd forgotten I deserved. My life back, my peace back, myself back. I learned something through all of this. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is refuse to be destroyed. Sometimes leaving isn't giving up, it's waking up. It's choosing life over loyalty to someone who's become your danger instead of your safety. I still live in Charlotte, still work at the library, still tend my garden, but now I do it without fear, without looking over my shoulder, without wondering what mood someone will be in when they come home. I do it in peace, and that peace, that simple, beautiful peace, is worth more than any marriage certificate, any shared history, any hope that someone will change. To anyone watching this who's living what I lived, hear me. You deserve better. You deserve safety. You deserve respect. You deserve peace. And you don't have to wait until it gets as bad as it got for me. You can leave now. You can ask for help now. You can choose yourself now. Please, please, choose yourself. What would you have done in my place? Would you have called the police that night? Would you have left years earlier? Would you have planned, like I did? Comment below and let me know what city you're watching from. I want to know how far this message travels. To every woman who needs to hear this, you are not alone. I see you. I was you. And you can survive this. You can more than survive. You can thrive. If this story moved you, if it made you think or feel or remember your own strength, please hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss stories of survival and strength. Your support means more than you know. It means that stories like mine matter. That women like me, like us, matter. Remember this. You deserve peace. You don't need permission to choose it. Not from your husband. Not from your family. Not from anyone. You just need courage. And if you're watching this, if you've made it this far, you already have that courage. You just need to use it. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for bearing witness to my pain and my strength. Thank you for being part of my healing. Until the next story, remember, you are worthy. You are strong, and you deserve a life without fear. Choose yourself. Always choose yourself.